But yeah, man, I really appreciated your article. It really spoke on immigration in a different light. But what you said is so true. Um, you know, at some point the white people here were immigrants, right? And so it's so ironic that they now have this crazy stance on immigration, right? And that's precisely what Frances Cress Welsing was saying. She was saying that white men went on ships around the world and they impregnated women around the world and took over around the world. And they're now terrified of minorities doing to the world what they did to it. And so they're hyper vigilant about it. They don't even want it to get started, right? And so that's why they view immigration that way, because we all know they're hypocritical. They don't want to apply things fairly. But now in Reconstruction, right? So after slavery, they entered
Hmm.
they entered a really messed up time in America where a lot of black people were actually sharecroppers still, because they couldn't afford it. They couldn't afford, like, it was very difficult for them to create their economic base. They had to fight and crush for it, right? Especially because
Yeah.
Dr. King said they went from freedom to famine, right? And that's so true. They went from freedom to famine. Like, if your slave master frees you, but they've given you nothing to sustain yourself with, then freedom is deadly at this point, right? But
Yeah.
here's the
Yeah.
other thing: black people had all of the skills, right? Black Americans were building everything, they were doing all of the work. So they had all of the skills. So after a certain amount of time, they actually started to catch up, so much so that they had their own
Mm.
everything, right? Everything.
Yep.
And this was in Jim Crow, during Jim Crow era, right? Where
Hmm.
segregation existed, and black people uh had subpar resources in comparison to white America, because obviously they had 400 years of economic wealth built up, right, within the system.
Hmm. Yeah.
But the problem was now black people had all the skills and experience to build these things, and they caught up literacy wise and started to have incredible um you know an incredible rise. And so they started to destroy these towns systematically. The first time an airplane was used in an attack was on black people.
When was that?
This was during the time when they were bombing black towns because they started to become so affluent. A lot of the lakes that are lakes now are flooded black
Hmm.
towns. They're flooded black American towns, man. Right? So
Crazy.
that's what I'm saying. So now when you are in Jim Crow, they now needed a way to get back control over commodities. They also needed a way to destroy the economic bases that black people had built. So they came up with this idea of integration, right? And integration was twofold. It was to get blacks to abandon the idea of a separate state, which was what it would have led to, right? Except not in the way of the Civil War. When it comes to slavery or not slavery, it would have, like, black people would have had their entire own infrastructure, dang near country, which is what should have been given to a free peoples that was taken, right? So now when you look at um a the thing of immigration now, right? They are so gung ho about preventing black people from rising. So now they started to pin black people up against immigrants, whether it's African immigrants, Mexicans, but African immigrants, separate problem. The Mexicans and the Latinos is a different problem as well. So they'll when there's Democratic nominees and presidents, a lot of times they'll let in uh Latinos for a cheaper labor force, right? And this won't be something that's said out loud, But this labor force ends up replacing a lot of black people because especially black men, because the trades are largely represent a lot of black men, a lot of white men too, but a lot of black men. And so whenever you bring
Yeah.
in this highly skilled group of people that that now can do it for a cheaper wage, now you completely disenfranchise the citizens that take that position, right? And so this is
Yeah.
their whole quote unquote, oh, the Mexicans are taking our jobs, right? But it's not because
Yeah.
they're inherently bad. It's because capitalists have created a system where it incentivizes a business owner to always find cheaper labor, right? And so
Oh yeah. Of
now
course,
you
the
have,
maximizing the profit.
yeah, now you have,
But before you get there, I mean, I just wanted to talk about, when you mentioned about how communities were destroyed because they knew the potential black people had in growth. I mean, look at what happened in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Tulsa was just one of very many.
But just that shows, yeah, very many, but that shows an example of
Yeah.
how when black people come together and they're united, and how we have that economic prowess. It's just that the system is somewhat rigged so that
It's not
um,
somewhat rigged. Africans,
it is.
because Africans, right? We have a problem of truly understanding American history. But American history shaped African history because everything that was done on the continent was done in the Americas first, down to how they broke down the tribes, the native tribes using alcohol and duplicitous tactics. The British East Africa Trading Company just took a page out of British imperialists that came and did it in America, right? So when Africans come here and they say things like, oh, African Americans need to work harder, because they're comparing the social help that African Americans get in America to the social help we get in Africa, forgetting the fact that all of these social programs are because Black Americans fought, died, and succeeded in making sure that they actually got these things for their descendants. So the descendants that are on, even welfare, right? Shout out to Sergeant Willie Pete.
But
He
see,
says you
also,
got the he says America has the black people they deserve, right?
yes, you're right. I mean, it only makes sense if you look at, when you're doing the comparison. It's not that there's a difference between us looking as Africans, looking at that comparison, and why are Black Americans here not putting in the effort. I mean, with all these social programs, one would wonder because it's easier for us when we come here because it's much better than what we experience in terms of infrastructure, in terms of systems, things are working. You know, the bus is supposed to be here at one, it will be here at one,
I
not 101.
That's
You
true.
know,
Check it out
so
though.
that's what I'm saying.
My bad. My
So this
bad.
is
Go
a
ahead. Go
strange
ahead.
thought.
I'll allow it. Go ahead.
Yeah.
My bad.
So the thing is, when you come here, you see that things are working. If you put a bit of effort, extra effort than I would have done back at home, I would get more. I have the systems are working. If I truly work hard, I'll be able to achieve something. And you you appreciate that you have those social programs and things are working. You pay your taxes and you actually see things working the way they're supposed to, and you gain that appreciation. And you wonder why everyone else is not appreciating the way the system is, because you have that backdrop. You are comparing it to something. But Black Americans can't compare it to any other thing. So this is what they have. And it's very hard to really try and understand or put ourselves in their shoes.
That's wrong. That's wrong. And that's why I'm trying to tell you, bro, you are unequivocally wrong on that, right? And again, this is a perspective that you can only have if you have the education of Black America, right? Remember, you can't say, oh, you're not taking advantage of these social programs simply because you don't have a comparative analysis. You have a singular analysis. That's not true because they created them. That's what I'm trying to tell you, is a lot of these programs are because they made them, right? And secondly, Africans, because of their lack of knowledge in American history, compare themselves to African Americans, right? But what happened in Africa is more akin to what happened to the Native Americans without the genocide. So a lot of what happened to Africans was not akin to the slavery. It was akin to what they did to the Native Americans, which was they took the native tribes, they gave them alcohol, took the kids, right? Put them in Catholic boarding schools. And then in 1 or 2 generations, they completely killed the African, but kept the body, right? And so that's more akin. For black people in America, black people in America were the #1 experimented on group of people for medicine, for psychological, ideological subversion, and that's why they don't take advantage of certain programs. It's because they took a systematic co-intel approach to destroy them, right? In a way that you couldn't do unless you were another government, right? And let's not forget they destroyed that government too. So all I'm saying is a lot of times Africans, you can't say, oh, in a way we can't begin to understand. No, you can completely understand. Because again, they
Listen,
know our
Mr.
literature, they know our histories.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. I mean, we had colonialism back in Africa. Here we had, you know, everyone had their own experience, and it's generations and generations ago, maybe 3 or 4 generations ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, the situation is skewed. The place is skewed, and they benefit only white people, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what do you do?
For
All these
one,
injustices that happened. So hear me out. So all the pillage that was done back in Africa,
mm-hmm.
all the death, the genocide, all the undertakings, the espionage, all those things that happened back in Africa that America had an hand in. Even whatever is happening in terms of geopolitics and all that, it matters. It does. What happened in the past, what's happening right now, what's going to happen in the future, it matters. But when it comes to as an individual, does it really, as much as it matters that the situation is skewed, what am I doing? Because there has to be a blueprint to getting out of whatever system or finding your way
that's
out
what
of
I'm
this.
getting to. That's why I'm saying the first thing in the blueprint is to bridge the gap, bro. The gap is this. Hang on, let me.
How do you bridge
That's
the gap?
what I'm telling you. The step #1. The gap is this. This is the gap. Malcolm X went to Kenya, where we're from, and spoke to Piogama Pinto. You can't go to a university in America, to an Africana Studies department, and them not know who Kwame Nkrumah is, Patrice Lumumba is, Julius Nyerere is, the Mau Mau. You can't go to an Africana Studies department and them not know who they are. They've read their literature, they know all of their ideologies, and they can break them down completely, right? It's 2025. Last year, I went to universities in Kenya, and I've spoken to many, many African professors. They know of Malcolm X, they can't quote him. They know of Dr. King, they can't quote him. They know of, right, XYZ. They know of, sometimes they don't even know of, and they are professors in the exact same field of diaspora studies that Americans are. So the first gap is this. Hang on, let me finish. The first gap is this, bro. If you are an African living in America and you haven't read Malcolm X, you can't speak on American anything, especially race relations, because you don't know it. If you are a black, or if you are an African and you don't know about the systematic making of a slave, if the making of a slave as a title, you don't even know what that title is, you can't speak on American race relations. Africans speak on American race relations, and they haven't even read basic prominent leaders' work. They haven't. And so that's unacceptable. My
So,
father is a professor of political science, and he has not read not a single page of Malcolm X. That's absurd, right?
Listen, but let me ask, because you see, everyone has a different background. Like everyone is on upbringing, the way they look,
they know yours, they know ours.
Yes,
they know all of
but
ours.
I don't think what you said is entirely true. What you said about
prove it wrong.
When you go to universities in Kenya, no.
Have you read
I'm
it?
sure you didn't go to all the universities,
bro. I'm talking, bro. I've spoken to over 100 professors, bro. If 100, if 0 out of 100, bro, what?
But hey,
bro, 100 professors, bro. I have them listed by name. I have and some of them live in America. Some of them live in America.
By me not knowing Malcolm X, does it make me a lesser hustler?
No, I'm not talking about hustling. It makes you lesser able to understand a system that you benefit from people who sacrificed in ways you can't even know because you haven't read it.
Then what?
Then now, so once you read that, now you know that your skills that you think as an individual with hustling was the whole point of why they prefer continental Africans to work in America, because they don't have to deal with the baggage of having to pay black people, right? Because African Americans or Africans are just happy to be able to have an economic opportunity that was snatched from them on their own continent by the same people. So, and that's why I'm saying is Africans don't have the same proximity to white people that African Americans have had. And so their perspective is not just up close personal, right? But they have come up with ideas that the continent still has not come up with. And these ideas would greatly help the issues that the continent is currently facing, because America faced these issues in like the 1700s with their black people. And they still have the literature from it. Show me a Kenyan book from a Kenyan scholar from 1820. Exactly. That's what I'm talking about.
You know what I mean? Hey, listen, Victor. A lot of this was passed on. It was oral literature. We didn't have any form of writing.
So my point is that you don't have it, whether or not it's not there. I'm saying examine what's there.
It's been documented. That's why you can't say show me a book from 1820, because a lot of what
not just any book, my brother, not just any book, not just any book, a book on white supremacy. A book on white supremacy and how to deal with white supremacy. Africans were not studying that then. We were still completely conquered. Completely conquered.
But you see, when you do, so you see, that's the challenge, because if there's a certain demand for Africans to understand Black Americans and the history,
because they have answers.
They may have the answers.
They do have answers. They do have answers.
Listen, Victor. So then, if they have the answers, what specific answers do they have, and to what extent? Because if they have the answers, why have we not used it? Why is it that?
Because Africa has the infrastructure.
Listen. It has.
You have to ask me one question at a time, bro. This is like a 4-part question. So ask me one question at a time.
So if we have the answer, why is it that the top 400 richest white people are richer than all the Black Americans put together?
Because, again, when you have a free labor force for 400 years, you're going to always be richer. You had a free economic base for 400 years. Of course, you're going to be richer than all the Black Americans. And again, that's why I was trying to tell you, bro, you're asking me many questions at the same time. The answers that I'm talking about are, what is the answer of what white supremacy is? Africans don't even know what white supremacy is. They can't define it.
That's what I'm asking.
Right? African Americans defined it already very quickly.
So So the homage that we need to pay in terms of understanding the
It's not a
history,
homage. It's not just a homage, right? It's an analysis. It's a comparative analysis. Africans,
but to give answers, because you say Black Americans have answers
yes,
to this, right? So
to
that's why
questions
I ask you.
Africans are still asking today, because they don't have the proximity to white people that African Americans have had. If the enemy is in my face every day versus the enemy is fighting me by proxy, dude, the enemy who has him in his face every day knows him better than you do. Stop the intellectual arrogance. African Americans have had more contact and more knowledge with them than Africans have at all. So it's
You
just
could,
in general, bro. It's
you
arrogant
could
to
actually
be
say the
like,
same
what
because listen,
answers do they have?
listen, Victor.
Uh-huh.
You see, the thing is, we've also remember
Mm-hmm.
we had trade even right before the British came in. We've also had that experience with British, the same
You
way
didn't raise
Black
their
Americans have
children,
had.
bro. You didn't raise their children for 400 years. You didn't build their buildings for 400 years. You didn't write their documents for 400 years. You didn't
So what's
fight
the
them
blueprint?
physically for 400 years. You did
I,
not just that, but again, I'm trying to tell you is there are you're asking me many questions, and just to answer one of them, it takes a couple sentences, right? So ask me one,
Mhm.
and then we can move on to the next one of that same subpoint that you want to get to. You asked me what answers. I said the answer to what white supremacy is and how it works. That source, a person like Dr. Francis Cress Welsing, a person like Neely Fuller, a person like Malcolm X, a person like Frederick Douglass, right? Those alone. Have you read those people? Have you read those people?
I haven't.
Right.
Is it
So I'm saying,
mandatory that I should?
that first question that you have, I just gave you four sources of people who answered it across hundreds of years of time. Frederick Douglass was a slave. Francis Cress Welsing died just the other day, right? So not the other day is Kenyan slang for, recently. But yeah, I'm saying that that's the answer to one question, right? White supremacy being looked at as a construct of genetic survival is not at all a perspective Africans have had. Not at all, right? Now let's move on to okay, what answers would that be and how would that help? When you asked the money question, when you said, okay, if they have all the answers, why are white people still infinitely richer than the black community put together? You
Correct.
know that in order to keep an economic base, you need weapons, correct? You need
Mhm.
weapons. That's why that's why Europe's banking system is still absolutely bending us over, right? Because we don't have the weapons to protect ourselves, right? And if the Sahel states don't get some nukes soon, just like that one UN representative said, they're not going to be able to do that either, because you can't build what you can't protect. And so that's what America started with, was okay, let's start with this. We're going to use this gun and we're going to get our stuff. But again, black Americans have written about this in literature for extensively for hundreds of years, and they know ours. We're still arguing why we shouldn't learn theirs, but they actually know how to deal with this enemy way better than we do. A majority of the Pan-African movement, right? Its success was from civil rights leaders. Its success was from civil rights leaders. Its death was from African leaders. That's because we took the money. They a lot of them died, but a majority of the new ones, they took the money, man. Right? So I'm saying, even in your first question, there are four very large sources that some of them you know of, but you haven't read. Why is it that when African American scholars hear anything that Africans have to say, they admire it, they listen to it, they study it, they know it, they can recite it by heart? That is intellectual arrogance on our part, man. It really is. There, there, there's a level of intellectual arrogance that is just unacceptable, and we have to be more accountable for it, especially when we move to America and then we share sentiments about their work ethic in America, and we know zero about their history, but they can damn near regurgitate our history, and there's 55 countries, and they know at least 5 or 6, right? 5 or 6 countries' history. We can't learn one extra, but I promise you, we know a lot of Britons because Britain colonized us, and we know a lot of Britons. That's unacceptable, right? That's unacceptable. And this form of Afrocentrism, Black Americans taught me this. Black Americans instilled this. Africans are not Afrocentric. Africans want to come to America for an economic come up that then allows us to be bourgeois in our own societies, but we know our societies are too corrupt to even fix, and we don't even want to fix them. Black Americans decided they would fix it, and they weren't even in Africa. They were here, and they did that. And they were
But they
13% of the
did that because they were
population.
here.
And they did it while they were
Yeah,
here.
if that was the case,
Uh-huh.
then why don't they extend the same back in Africa? If
They
because you see, the thing
did.
is,
They wrote it in literature, and Africans don't want to read it. That's what I'm saying. They did. They did. A majority of the diaspora's movement back to Africa and the economic that a lot of that started from African American investment. And that's why I'm saying is we have all these questions and all these judgments, never any interest to pick up their damn books, man. Never any interest to go read the autobiography of Malcolm X. That's one of the most famous books of all time. That's one of the most famous books of all time. Why haven't professors with PhDs read that book, and they're political scientists, quote unquote Pan-Africanists? Most of these economic Africans that come here are quote unquote Pan-Africans, but they haven't read leaders who started the Pan-African movement. Most people don't even know. You guys don't know people who started the Pan-African movement in America. The Pan-African movement was not started in Africa. It was started in America. They started it. It just finally bridged when they connected it, but it started here. Right? And that's what I'm trying to say is, bro, the amount of intellectual arrogance, we're even blind to how much of it there is because we have a numbers and a cultural backing that is based in land and resources. Because we already have land and resources, we believe that that's the end, even though we don't control either. The way to control both of those things is through a cultural mindset that is only learned by actually being around your enemy long enough to know yourself, which was established by Black Americans. But because, again, this land is not their own land or their own resources, the mindset that they have can't be applied as well. And that's an arguable statement too, because I know y'all natives. Don't come at me too hard. I know y'all native. You know what I mean? I know you're native, but I'm saying in general, if the connection comes here, Africans can now learn to defend and protect and value their own systems, their own land, and their own people if they actually had half of the Afrocentric pride, half of the Afrocentric understanding that African Americans had. That was what was stripped from them. So they ended up valuing it significantly more than we did, right? Remember, the mind trick is that you actually think they don't have something to offer just because it didn't work. Well, my nigga, our shit didn't work. We still have something to offer. So that's what I'm saying is that's arrogant, bro. And the arrogance is just one way. It only comes from Africans. All my OGs here know our stuff, man. All my OGs here know our stuff. And all my OGs here know everything that they need to know when it comes to the continent and what's going on now, because they're leaving the America we hold so dear to go back. Right? So that should show you something in itself. They're busy trying to go back to the same places. We're like, yeah, screw this, because they know fixing a corrupt system over there is still better than living here. But we believe the exact opposite, man. It's a Jedi mind trick. It's the greatest Jedi mind trick supremacy ever pulled globally. I'm telling you, it's deep. But I simply implore you, before you ask more questions, explore at least one of those sources from the first question. Right. And some of those were answered in the 1800s. But because, again, Africans only value global history as long as it's European. They don't care about the Black history in America, man. We should, man.
That's not entirely true. But anyway, I'll need to cut this short, man. I'll need to.
You said that's entirely true?
That's not entirely true.
Yeah, man. It's entirely true. And we gotta cut that shit. But it's all Gucci, bro. I appreciate you. I appreciate you having the conversation, man.
Appreciate you, bro.
Real shit. Real shit.
Appreciate you too, bro. Anyway, we'll continue this conversation.
All right,
I
man.
need to talk more about this.
All right.
All right.
All right, bro. Peace.
All right, take care. Peace.